Welcome back, everybody. It is the Working Brother back at you with another talk for what has become almost a regular thing. We've got George and we've got Drago. We've got two guests for this talk, as you guys might have grown accustomed to in the last one. Hi, George. How you doing? You busy there? Did we interrupt you?
I'm doing great. No,
Excellent.
I'm just looking at something about the Trump and Putin negotiations.
All right, we'll get into that. We'll get into some of the articles Drago's written. Drago, how you doing? You excellent? A long time no talk.
Long time no talk, right? Exactly.
I don't know if these will be uploaded sequentially, but they will be uploaded. So everybody who is new here, hi, welcome. I don't know how you got lost into this corner of YouTube, but you're welcome here. This is a recluse comedy show. Nothing we say here has anything to do with reality. Drago here writes political and geo-strategic comedy. George just talks about stuff that nobody really cares about. Pipelines and petrodollars. It's like totally unimportant stuff. And we've got some articles by Drago here. America, Japan, and Australia coordinate actions against China in Asia,
Right.
Pacific.
Yep.
This is an older article,
Yeah,
I'm guessing. January 31st.
Yeah, this is January 31st. Yeah, like now it's over 2 weeks. I mean, close to 2 weeks old at this point. And it's of course it's about the deteriorating situation. Security situation in the Asia Pacific, because right now they're trying to build like this sort of Asia Pacific NATO that's going to include the U.S., Australia, and Japan, and they also want to get Taiwan in. But the problem is, like, Taiwan, according to international law, Taiwan doesn't exist. It's not really a country. It's a province of China. And of course, the U.S. Admitted that. Recognized Taiwan as part of China because of the, they wanted to abuse essentially the Sino-Soviet split of the 1960s and 70s, and to get China on their good side, of course, and then they used that to sow discord in the communist world. That was largely successful because the Russians and the Chinese were not on good terms until 1989, when Gorbachev removed 5,000 Russian nuclear-tipped missiles that were pretty much there to obliterate China in 5 minutes. So ever since, of course, the U.S. has had an issue because they can't really recognize Taiwan, because that would be pretty much tantamount to a declaration of war on China, and of course China would then go on Taiwan in full force. So it's a kind of an issue now, but still, of course, Taiwan is important because of the semiconductors and these advanced microchips. And the Taiwan Semiconductor Company, it produces like 80% of all of these, and controlling that, of course, is very important for the advanced global industry that pretty much controls most of the world economy.
I'm happy that you mentioned new NATO in the Aegean thing, and I've got George here because while you were talking, I did a search in the background. No, I can't show it to you, but I will leave a link. It is Working Brother Talks 39, number 39, if you can imagine that, where George and I talked about how NATO and ASEAN, Chinese expansionism, King Faisal, and Kissinger, which sounds a lot like some of the things that you just said.
Yeah.
Yeah. George, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that people don't realize is a lot of these fake Chinese, well, not fake, practice invasions, but I mean they're these practice invasions around Taiwan that China does. The purpose of that is really they're telling the world that yes, the United States can cut off all of China's oil and gas coming from the Middle East through the Straits of Hormuz or the Straits of Malacca, but they're saying that they can block the Philippines, Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan from getting the same Middle Eastern and African oil supplies by cutting down the Taiwan Strait and the 8 dash line atolls that they built up in the South China Sea. So if the US and UK want to have a maritime choke point strategy, they can do a maritime choke point strategy also. So they really want Japan to finish the Hokkaido Sakhalin pipeline. They only need 40 miles of that to get Russian natural gas by pipeline to help Japan's automobile industry, which is going out of business, that a lot of people don't realize. They've also, since 2014, been talking about a Vladivostok through North Korea and then down to Seoul natural gas pipeline. The United States stopped the pipelines going to Japan and the ones going to South Korea back in 2014, 2016. Well, they also, during the same time period, they stopped the South Stream projects in the Black Sea, and then of course Eric Schmidt started Nord Stream against U.S. pressure, and then that was eventually blown up. People need to understand that wherever these Russian natural gas pipelines are going to a coastal industrial rimland power, the United States has systematically blocked all of them. It's not just about Nord Stream. It's not just about South Stream in Ukraine. It's all of them. So what China is trying to do is they're telling South Korea and Japan, finish those pipelines and leave the first island chain alliance. So the United States is responding by trying to rebuild, their Asia Pacific alliance, and ASEAN is not really going along with that, because they would really don't want to become another Afghanistan or another Ukraine.
I've got some other articles here by Drago. We've got about 10 of them, which usually takes us an hour. And considering there's two of you chiming in, it will probably be a little bit longer of a talk this time. But we are going to try and keep up the pace. Neo-Nazi fans of nuts. Junta commits war crimes, spreads fakes to prevent mass surrender. Is this the incident where they were shooting that building full of civilians in the Kursk region?
Partially,
or is this something else?
Partially, it's also that, but more specifically, I mean, there are several incidents involved. But one of the incidents is the video of the soldiers of the 155th, the separate mechanized brigade, which were essentially being led to the front line in handcuffs. This is also a war crime, by the way. I mean, because you're taking the soldiers to a war they don't want to be in. And of course, this was done by the TCC, or the infamous Territorial Recruitment Office of the Ukrainian Army. And then there's also, of course, the gruesome atrocities that you mentioned of the people in those buildings that were found, shot dead in the Kursk region of Russia. I mean, it's not the whole Kursk region. There's a lot of misconceptions about that in the media. They often present, when you look at the maps that the mainstream media is presenting, it's almost as if the whole of Kursk Oblast was taken by the Ukrainians, but actually it's just a relatively small patch of land of several hundred square kilometers. And of course, this is nothing in comparison to what the Russians have been able to take in Ukraine itself. So, but anyway, in order to continue, of course, this war, they are just sending a bunch of guys to just get blown to pieces in the Kursk region, and of course other parts of the front line, but especially in the Kursk region, because as we can see now, the Zelensky regime is trying to swap those several hundred square kilometers of land in Kursk for the entire land that Russia holds in former Ukraine. So that's going to work. But either way, the Kiev regime forces are pretty much battered, and they are pretty much not an effective fighting force anymore. But they somehow need to be kept afloat, and of course now they're pouring a lot of money into the TCC to get people to pretty much kidnap Ukrainians on the streets and just send them off to to a recruitment office and then off to
I,
war.
I, I heard today or I read somewhere that basically the new recruits, the young ones, the newly mobilized above 18-year-olds, um, they're getting paid more than the ones who are already serving. And the ones who are already serving are rebelling against this. Let's put it that way. So
Yeah.
there's that going on. George, I'm guessing you don't have much to say about this military stuff, so I'm going to move on to this second article of Drago's, a little bit
I
out
just
of...
want to say one thing
Go on.
regarding the thing that you mentioned in Kursk. I'm not sure if people remember. We actually talked about 1,000 civilians from Kursk Oblast missing, a few months ago, and like nobody in the news was saying this. And we were talking about this, and now after several months, we find a bunch of these people have been shot, and they were civilians. So that's where they're missing.
Not only were they shot, to be clear, but they were all left in a building, and then that building was artilleried or HIMARSed or whatever you want to call it, but to like clear the evidence, so to say. Very aircraft carrier style tactics. In any case, both plus TV. Why Russia doesn't just end the Ukraine conflict immediately? Drago, don't say anything. George, you want to tell us? Without reading the article, do you want to tell us what Drago wrote in this article? And then Drago, you can tell us how correct George is. Go on, George.
I don't have any doubts about that. So yeah.
Go on, George.
Oh, I mean, yeah, my take is always over, protecting their, the maritime, riverine, and terrestrial land bridge choke points. So for me, it's, why doesn't Putin just keep on doing what he's doing when there is no more, when they fight down to the last Ukrainian, to use Mearsheimer's terminology, they can just stroll forward, move into the Odessa Oblast, and control the entire Black Sea fleet, because that would be the most effective way to protect their shipping lanes, from that perspective. And then, yes, if they drag this out, the populist parties will win as the energy prices soar, and then Putin will have a changed political landscape in the whole Danube River Valley. So, yeah, we've already talked about that several times. So, yeah, my position on that hasn't changed. I just need to read that article. If you can send me the links on Telegram.
I will. But Drago, do you want to tell us how much of that he got correct?
Well, all of it. I mean, pretty much all of it. I didn't, of course, mention all of that in the article itself. I was mostly focusing on the fact that, for Russia to take all of Ukraine now doesn't make sense because it's a destroyed country. So if Russia were to take, let's imagine NATO comes to Russia and
Stop. I have to. But Riviera, you can just, it'll be perfect.
Of course, if they really come to Russia and offer Ukraine on a plate, the Putin would say no. This is what people don't get, because if the Russians were to take all of Ukraine now, they would have to deal with the consequences of a destroyed society. And if you have 8 million people who have left the country, that means most of those who are left in the country are older people, pensioners, people who cannot be economically viable. They will not be working. They would not be, contributing to the economy because they can't. A person who's 65 cannot contribute to economy as much as a person who's 35. But that's pretty obvious to anyone with 2 functioning brain cells. So the Russians know that it's much better, it's more effective geostrategically and geoeconomically to let the West simply clean up its mess, and of course that's not going to happen. And they will not take all of Ukraine. For them, what's really important is to make sure that Ukraine is not a part of NATO, and of course they can make sure of that by simply saying, okay, deploy any sort of a peacekeeping force, and it's going to be obliterated by hypersonic and ballistic missiles. And no matter how much high tech that force is, when you have like a 1,000-pound warhead dropping on your head, you're dead. That's it. Like there's nothing that can prevent that. And of course, even the Ukrainians themselves have admitted that the Patriot systems supposedly shoot down 4.21% of Iskander missiles. So those numbers are almost certainly false, but let's take them as true. That means like 96% of all Russian missiles, even according to the Kiev regime, are actually hitting their targets. That's an enormously high percentage, and that means that whoever is deployed there is dead. So for the Russians, it's more important for them to have these missile systems that can control most of Ukraine and not control Ukraine. So like you have the military dominance, but you don't have to deal with the economic mess left by NATO. So that's why Russia is not going to just end the war in Ukraine, and we're not going to see like some crazy shock and awe style takeover of Ukraine. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, well, like I said, when I wrote on General Petraeus's page by accident, yeah, it's the Western plan of fighting a guerrilla war, and the Russia's going to invade all the way to Warsaw and then on to Berlin, and it's going to be World War II all over again. Yeah, that's a bunch of nonsense. What Russia needs is it comes down to natural gas, because Gazprom is the state-owned enterprise. They're using their profits to do an export-led growth, import substitution, industrialization, investment program. That's what the United States has been trying to stop. Nothing else matters. That's what it's there to stop. So no, Russia just wants its seaport area. They know what the guerrilla warfare plan is in the United States, because they've been talking about that in Army Times and Stars and Stripes for, I don't know, like 15 years now or something. It's been a long time. So they've read it too. Their economic interest was to sell, natural gas through Poland into Germany. It wasn't to invade it. They just need the money. They don't care about anything else. This is not the Soviet Empire trying to spread communism for ideological reasons anymore, and trying to control the land bridge choke points. It's nothing about that anymore. It's a different Russia. They're trying to reinstitute the Orthodox Church again, because Marxist atheism failed as a cultural, it doesn't keep a culture together at all. And no, that was never the design of Russia, to move into that area. Especially, they're not going to move into the Catholic Ukrainian area, because they're Stepan Bandera followers. So they're just going to stay out of that. It's a liability on so many different dimensions. To think that they're going to take over all of Ukraine is so ludicrous. But the legacy media is talking to people that have never been there. I was talking to my friend Tim about, he worked for one of the discrete entities. We were talking about how come the people in the DC intelligence community, on LinkedIn and some of those other geopolitical groups that are on LinkedIn, it's like they don't know anything about these areas. He's like, George, they'd never been out of DC before. I went over there to live, in the Middle East, and travel through through Eurasia. So I've been over there for a long time, and I stayed there, and I watch historical documentaries like nonstop. Everybody knows that, and I read books all the time. So but the American public does not know that. They're so easily fooled. It's not only that the American public doesn't know that, is Trump went out and hired these people for his foreign policy advice. So that's why it's like, I'm like John McEnroe. This cannot be happening. You cannot be serious. It has happened in real life. So no, they
George,
don't want.
Keep calm. Wait for Russians.
Okay, all right, I will. Oh, I've run into tons of Russians. I play ice hockey, or at least I used to. So I'm used to running into Russians all the time, or they run into me. I mean,
considering that you mentioned the insurgency thing, I also mentioned that several times. Like they're hoping that the Russians are just going to mobilize 3 million soldiers, move into Ukraine, and then NATO would pretty much equip and finance the insurgency force. But now the Russians want to upend that game. What they want to do is they want to leave the Kiev regime to fester, essentially. And when things go to shit completely, then there's going to be a rebellion, but a rebellion against a NATO-backed regime. So it's far better for the Russians to actually have the rebels on their side instead of having to deal with the rebels by themselves, because insurgencies are a great way to waste billions of dollars and lose a bunch of very expensive equipment, because you can't really fight insurgents with a lot of the weapons that the Russians are using now, which are used against a powerful, conventional army. So counterinsurgency operations are a mess, and no country in known history has been able to destroy counterinsurgencies unless they've destroyed the population that was providing the manpower, which of course is a genocide, and the Russians have no intention of conducting that in Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, it's the counterinsurgency operations. Vietnam failed. Vietnam failed. The whole French Indochina Vietnam wars, that failed for everybody, because communism ended up collapsing in Southeast Asia, was a complete disaster, and then the United States certainly didn't win in Vietnam. And Mearsheimer's thesis is, since fascism, everybody ganged up on it and defeated that, so that ideology failed. Communism imploded for a bunch of different reasons, because it's a very inefficient economic structure. Well, I mean, in short, bureaucrats make everything easy for the people behind the counter and make everything almost impossible for the people in front of the counter. That's why capitalism is the opposite. If you don't please the people in front of the counter, if you don't please your customer, you're out of business. So, it doesn't work for that reason. But anyway, you're going to see the end of the United States as an ideology divorced from Christianity pretty soon. We're $36 trillion in debt. Doge can't move fast enough. And then Trump is using the reciprocal trade policy to try to stop, their current account trade deficits. But I agree with them. Everything there makes perfect sense. I know the deep staters are going nuts. Well, they don't know anything about anything anyway. But all Putin has to do is, again, I keep on saying, sit back and do nothing. He just has to watch the coalition between the Green New Deal left, the neoliberals, and the neoconservatives. It's such an logically incoherent system. It's going to fall apart. And the reason why I'm saying it's logically incoherent, the neocons want the United States and the UK, the sea powers, to be the only superpowers. Okay, but then you got the Green New Deal left outlawing fossil fuels, coal, and nuclear power. So how can a superpower sustain itself on renewables? It can't. So that the three coalitions of the West that run the United States, Canada, and the Five Eyes countries and Western Europe, it's so logically incoherent. It's so stupid. And the people within that coalition can't see it, and Trump can't reverse it fast enough.
This is a comedy show. Nothing we say here has anything to do with reality. I probably said that right at the beginning, but I feel like I have to say it again. But this, because it's a comedy show, we got to put up a meme. This was sent in by Maya. Maya not being a real name. But in any case, it's really not that hard to figure it out. On the left, you've got the USAID. And on the right, you've got the Socialist Party Workers of the World Unite. George, comments?
Yeah. They need to take linear programming classes and try to figure out why socialism doesn't work. You can't. Yeah, I say that as a joke for those people that that aren't familiar with how a Marx never really thought about how he was going to put this into effect until the Bolshevik Revolution occurred. They never thought about how they were going to price goods, so they left them at the current pricing levels. The problem with that is, with every new invention, it changes how you use resources to create consumer products. So because they couldn't figure out how to reallocate, well, they started to try to reallocate resources with linear programming, simultaneous equations, but you need to have like a billion by billion matrix back when they didn't have computers.
George.
So that was impossible. So they end up stifling technological growth because the bureaucrats couldn't continuously reallocate resources because it would take them too
George,
long to rebuild the equations, and then that failed.
you're gonna make me mute you with your
That was covered.
capitalist gobbledygook.
No, you don't.
Capitalist
No,
gobbledygook. It's not even propaganda.
no,
It's
no,
just
no.
gobbledygook. It's
It's
just words.
it's the
You're just
social
like
calculation
words.
debates. It's the socialist calculation debates between Mises and Hayek, circa late 20s and early 30s.
This
It's
is
not nonsense.
this is not that
I'm going
recording,
to talk
George.
about it for the next 5 hours now.
U.S. once again threatening Mexico with military strikes. This is right on your border, George. Are you afraid of the cartels coming to attack you and to take you to be a slave labor in Mexico?
Wait, when are they going to do this? I better load more magazines.
Speaking of, how many arms do you have at your disposal? Like how many various carbines and or handguns do you have at your disposal and rounds of ammunition? Are you willing to disclose that publicly?
I cannot confirm or deny the existence of those things.
All right. Drago, do you want to tell us about America being the new kid on the block that likes to bully people?
I think this ties into what George was saying about these, these guys from the deep state who are part of the Trump administration who don't really understand much about the world because they live in this echo chamber of their own design. Now they're threatening to bomb Mexico, specifically cartels in Mexico. Now, in most cases, of course, you would be against the cartels. I mean, any sane person is against those extremely violent, crazy cartels that are, going around and torturing and killing people and doing all sorts of nasty stuff. However, it's not going to make things better if you bomb a country, to get rid of the cartels. Just like bombing countries to get rid of terrorism didn't actually, get rid of terrorism. It actually exacerbated the issue because it turns out if you bomb people, then they will go to the terrorists because they think the terrorists are protecting them or whatever. Some conspiracy theorists would probably say that was the goal. I don't know. I'm probably not one of those people. Anyway,
Well,
jokes aside.
Using the B-52s to bomb the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Laos and Cambodia worked so well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, really, like if you really think about it, now jokes aside, it's ridiculous to most Mexicans, and I'm saying this because most Mexicans know who essentially created these cartels. And well, it's not Mexico; it was the freaking, Culinary Institute of America, as George said, and all these other like three-letter agencies. So America is using an excuse to bomb a country which is fucked up because of the policies of the deep state. So this is what's making a lot of Mexicans angry, and I think Trump needs to get rid of the people who are threatening to bomb Mexico because it's only going to make things worse. And if Trump wants to secure the border, he's going to have to work with Mexico, and going against Mexico, that means that Mexico is not going to cooperate in that regard. So he just has to get rid of all these warmongers. Otherwise, conflicts are only going to, get worse and increase in number around the world.
Yeah, the reason why I started writing about the worst case scenario in Energy Newsbeat and then the private chats, during the month, is Trump going to get rid of these people and change courses of action before it's too late and he gets blamed for losing, I'm going to say it again, Ukraine, the EU, and NATO, and then the Democrats win the midterms in the House and the Senate, and then they're going to immediately impeach him. The Democratic Party says impeachment nonstop all the time anyway. If they get the parties, then they're going to be like, Trump did this on purpose. We need to impeach him right now, and they will. So right now, Trump has got the people that will actually make that happen, and those are supposedly his Trump supporters. I mean, whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
You want me to start talking about the socialist calculation debates again?
Comedy show. Nothing to do with reality. Let's move on.
Economic history is a big deal.
Let's move on right next to the next article. USaid or AID. Monster hiding behind the mask of humanitarianism. Drago, do you want to give us the TLDR version?
Oh man, like this thing that I wrote is the TLDR version of everything that they've been doing. So if people really, really want to know, they should read the article. But the whole point is, I just want to mention one thing. They were setting up these so-called HIV charities in order to topple governments in Central America. That's how far they went, and they were financing thousands of independent journalists around the world who were, parroting the mainstream propaganda machine points. And, it's so interesting, a lot of the journalists in Serbia who were, presenting those points, they are now left without pay. And suddenly they've changed their tune. It's very interesting to see how they've changed their stances overnight. You would think that people who are so ideologically liberal would remain liberal for the rest of their days, but it seems if you cut the funding, they somehow turn far less liberal. Very interesting.
Yeah, that's we need to have Joaquin Flores in one of these discussions because that's kind of his specialty.
Yeah,
but yeah,
we'll definitely schedule that one of these days.
Yeah, because he has personal experience in that. I just from going to university and going through these different academic conferences that I go to all the time, or used to anyway. I get a glimpse of it, but I mean, I would never be involved with those people. I never had anything, in common with those people. I thought they were nuts. It's just the children of the 1960s liberals and 70s, civil rights, or now grandchildren or whatever. So yeah, if they have a group called the AIDS group or whatever they call these things, they find an issue that attracts left wingers, and then so then you're talking about what you're really talking about is cluster Bs and cluster Cs. Psychological disorders is who they attract, and yes, they use psychological profiling to do this. Marcuse and the Frankfurt School people, Horkheimer, they're all psychologists and sociologists, and they invented those models. And when they went from the Frankfurt School to Columbia, New York area, who ended up hiring them? With Edward Bernays and those people, it was the Culinary Institute. Well, back then it was not named the Culinary Institute of America. It was something else. And
Edward Bernays. Why does that name ring a bell? What was that name of that book that he wrote? Was it Russian propaganda? It was.
Yeah.
It sounds like a Russian name. That Bernays. Bernaysovsky. Bernazovich.
All this psychological profiling, it's been around for a while, except now with social media, it does it very, very quickly, build a known associates profile, figures out a way to attract them, and then you're going through a way of of getting people to do videos and training them how to do each step of the way. And through this process of training them how to do video editing and shared causes and all of this stuff, you're indoctrinating, you're finding the true believers, you're developing them, and then you have a dial riot squad.
This meme, because this is a comedy show, this meme was sent in by subscribers. Vex, he makes memes. Longtime subscribers will know. You can send them in on Telegram. In this whole USaid thing, is this whole USaid thing just kabuki and the rebranding to XAid? What do you guys think?
Very likely, because I mean, I don't think a country the size of the U.S. and the reach, global reach of the U.S. is just going to give up on such an important, power projection tool, because this sort of power projection is the basis of a country's soft power, so-called soft power. It's something that the Russians have never been good at. The Russians have always been good at, and when you come to them, they just obliterate you, come to your capital city and tell you you're defeated. On the other hand, the U.S. and these Anglo-American empires, telesocratic entities, what they do is they try to control you from the outside, from the inside, and then project power in the country without controlling it directly. And the USaid was a part of that. Starting
from like the Opium Wars type of thing.
Exactly. So because they knew that China was going to be, a very powerful adversary. So what you do is like you go and, force them to allow the use of opium by everyone all the time. And when everyone is so fucking stoned, they can't do anything. They can't really build an economy or a military that's going to challenge the dominance of telesocratic powers. So this is the same thing. I don't believe that Trump has had political reasons to get rid of the USaid. That was because the USaid was working with his political enemies. But it's almost virtually a given that this power vacuum left by USaid is going to be filled by people, other people. And of course, that means that those people are probably going to be loyal to Trump. But there's no way that the US is going to give up on such a, powerful leverage over other countries.
This meme was sent in by Dmitry Medvedev. You might know him. He says, hello again. During his first week back at the White House, Donald Trump tried to mislead and confuse the entire world, but not us. We won't be fooled that easily. And he posted this picture, which is basically a meme. It's one of the worst pictures of Trump I've ever seen. If there's a bad picture of Trump, this is it. I just wanted to give a shout out to Dmitry Medvedev, who's a confirmed subscriber. This is his first entry of the year for our meme show here. George, what were you going to say? Sorry, I had to show this meme.
Oh, yeah, the social media is here to stay. We've all signed up on different social media accounts. They've already grouped us on different continuums as far as where we are on different political scales. That's already done. You go back to the 7P plan. It's the left is trying to do the Yuri Bezmenov plan. They've already done that by the time he spoke. So there's reason why I'm saying this is Aristotle's 6 forms of government. There's a proper form of doing it and a perverted form, and the proper form creates a constructive behavioral dynamic, and the perverted form creates a destructive behavioral dynamic. So all you can hope for, because it's not going to go away, is it goes towards a proper form constructive behavioral dynamic. So it's not going to go away. Yes, it's going to be used by X. Will it improve the situation? I believe so. I hope so. Is it going to devolve into something down the road? Oh, yeah. Everything does. Plato's Republic, you go back to that. He starts talking about what is justice, but then it goes back to if you ever have a proper form of government in whatever phase, it only lasts a few generations, and then they start to change the culture, they start to change the Constitution till it comes into a perverted form. So that's never changed. that cyclical history of Plato and Aristotle has never changed. So yes, Musk can reform it into a proper form, X aid or whatever you want to call it. And then it's only going to be for a certain amount of time when that gets misused. So that's just my thoughts on that. But right
And
now, get rid of USAID and change it to the extent we can.
and this is not scripted, but the next article we've got here by Drago. Drago, are you there? Yeah, you are, huh? Okay, I thought you froze. Google finally admits it pursues advanced air weapons programs. Surprise!
Yeah, yeah, this
Who
is
could have thought it?
interesting. I've actually written already several times on the so-called Maven project and how they were trying to use that to essentially shape up the battlefield by pretty much using every spy device you can imagine, ranging from, I don't know, a smartwatch to an advanced surveillance system, security system. So what they do is they pretty much hack into all these things and they put them together to form like this unified ISR system that's going to maintain total control, total surveillance over an area. So the interesting thing is, of course, the Russians found a way to use electronic warfare systems to make sure that these things don't work. And of course, Google was involved in the development of the Project Maven, but supposedly they were outraged because of the ethical issues they had with that, of course. It seems they've now decided to, ditch those ethical norms that were preventing them from developing something they already developed anyway. So now they've removed the motto of "Don't be evil" to "Do the right thing," and of course, killing the Russians is the right thing. And they want to make sure that all the NATO partners and all these other countries have this system so that they can they can be more effective. I mean, it is an effective system because the Ukrainians were pretty much dumbfounded because the commanders of various units of the Ukrainian army during the initial days and weeks of the special military operation, they were dumbfounded because the Americans would often call them from Langley or the Pentagon, whatever, and they would tell them what's going on with their own units. So the Americans were often better informed about the movement of Ukrainian units than the commanding officers in the field. And this was because of the Maven, and a lot of Ukrainians were dumbfounded. I mean, they were really, really, they didn't understand how the U.S. knew better where their troops are than they themselves.
Wait. So you're saying, so you're saying the system was using Google's Android backdoors in Ukrainian cell phones on the front to basically geolocate and sound sensor and all kinds of other stuff them on the battlefield?
Not just Google's. Google was just one part of it. There's a lot of other companies, US big tech companies, which are part of it.
Yeah, you got the different discrete entities in the United States that deal with electronic warfare. People can go on Google and get a list of them. I won't mention the names here, but what they're doing is they're tracking the GPS unit in the phone and the IMEI number to the individual, and then they're using that in a Blue Force tracker format that's already connected to Google Earth, which was funded by those same entities. That's what they're doing. So then they can tell where their entities are joined and where the enemy is coming from, and then tell them how to maneuver in battlefield tactics, from those, from control rooms that are on the other side of the ocean, on the other side of the world. Yeah, that's how they do that, by the way.
Exactly. And by the way, I just want to say the Russians found a genius way to counter that. And because the Starlink was part of this system, for all those people who think Musk is some sort of a philanthropist, and I mean, he's a Pentagon contractor, for Christ's sake. That's all you need to know.
Oh my! Hey, don't say anything about contractors.
Oh yeah, right. I forgot. So the point is, what the Russians would often do, they would use these strategic lasers. They have a bunch of them now to blind the satellites of the Starlink system, and oftentimes their electronic warfare would actually triangulate the positions of American and NATO operatives who were in Ukraine or their proxies in Ukraine, and then you would have an Iskander flying to that position in a matter of minutes. And that's how the U.S. decided to pull out.
Wait. I need to wind this back for people and for myself a little bit. So you're telling me that Musk works with the government and his Starlink is used by the Ukrainians, and this Starlink operates from space, and the Russians detected these space signals from Starlink, and based on that, they figured out where NATO operatives in Ukraine 404 are, and then used lasers to fire into space to kill these Starlink, and that explains why we've been seeing so many of these Starlink satellites falling from space recently. I don't know if you came across that story, but I recently came across a story that there's an extremely high rate of decay of the old Starlink satellites. Now that you're telling me they're being blinded by Russian lasers, it makes a lot more sense.
Because you remember, I just want to remind people, they should remember when Musk was talking about how he's risking his company by helping Ukraine. Like, what does that mean? It means that you're fighting a superpower enemy who actually has anti-satellite weapons, and it can use them effectively. So what the Russians have to do, they don't have to shoot down a laser. They don't have to shoot down a satellite, with an ASAT missile. All they have to do is to hit it with a laser, essentially disable it, and then the satellite is going to continue its movement through the orbit, and after some time, it's going to lose the orbit and fall out of the sky. But the point is, they can do this. Of course, they have the technology, they have the means to do it, and they started doing it after they realized that Musk was helping the Ukrainian army to stay afloat, and not just in terms of communication, but also ISR and all these other things that I mentioned. That's why he said, I've been risking my company, and my reputation and everything else for Ukraine, and Ukraine was paying him back by putting him on its kill list, the peacekeeper, something like that, peacemaker list. I forgot the name. Anyway, the point is, like, and apart from that, not just that, but also the operatives. There were certain operatives that had to be on the ground in Ukraine. You can't just do everything, from an office at the Pentagon. You need to have people on the ground to coordinate stuff, and and of course those people. They thought they were safe until an Iskander comes flying, at Mach 8 with a 1,000 pound warhead. So good luck with that.
And then they have skiing accidents and diving accidents in the Mediterranean. In freak skiing accidents in the Mediterranean. In any case, I'm gonna get to the next article. French Mirage 2000s. 5 for the Kiev regime. Yet another game changer. Or more.
Yeah.
More poo-poo. More hoopla. Not the most flattering picture. Are those like bombs, or are those
no, those are
drop tanks, huh?
Drop tanks, yeah, exactly. A lot of French aircraft have them, including the Rafale, because the French have an issue with the range.
That's what she said.
Yeah, that's what she said. A lot of French aircraft are made to be compact and small, to be able to, use them as multi-role platforms. We can see that in the Rafale as well, and of course in the Mirage, previously in previous decades. So that's why a lot of French aircraft cannot match let's say, the U.S. and Soviet or Russian aircraft, which are pretty big, and capable of, going very far, flying very far. For instance, the F-15 and the Russian Su-27 and all the derivatives of it. Now, what I mentioned in this specific article, and it's something that, I mean, it's a serious thing. It should be noted that the Mirage 2000 is also a nuclear capable aircraft. Now, the Mirage 2005, it's not nuclear capable. However, all you need are, well, pretty simple modifications to make it nuclear capable. So this is what the Russians have been saying for quite some time. There are certain people, insane people, as George said, among these neocons, who really want to give Ukraine nuclear weapons. So, in order to have nuclear weapons that are effective, you also need delivery systems. One of the ways to give Ukraine delivery systems, of course, are aircraft. And they got aircraft from Denmark, from Denmark, from Norway, from the Netherlands and Belgium. And Netherlands and Belgium are part of the NATO nuclear sharing program. So that their F-16s are actually nuclear capable. They got those too. And now they're getting, the Mirage 2000, which is also a nuclear capable aircraft, or one of its versions is. And the French also have a bunch of these in their, storage facilities. All they have to do is give them to the Ukrainians, and a lot of those are the Mirage 2000Ns, which are actually capable of delivering nuclear weapons. So I don't see any other point of having the aircraft like this, apart from them being nuclear delivery systems. And because if it's just a conventional war, there's no way these things can match the Russians, like in speed, in the maximum flight altitude, in the amount of payload, in the missiles that they use. I mean, there's no NATO missile that can match let's say the Russian R-37M, which is like essentially a 400-kilometer missile that can shoot down tankers and strategic aircraft and so on, and also fighter aircraft, because the R-37 actually set several world records in Ukraine by shooting down aircraft from like 200 or 250 kilometers. So in that regard, the Mirage 2000 is nothing. So unless it's a nuclear delivery system, it makes very little sense.
You mentioned the Su-57. George, I'm sorry to drag you along, but you volunteered to come along for this. We've got to get through 2 more articles, or actually 3 more. The next one is tied to aircraft. I'm going to skip you for the aircraft stuff, because you did, when we get to vehicle-borne improvised explosives, or VBIEDs, we'll ask you for some takes on that. Overshadowed by the Su-57, disgraced F-35 left without airtime at Aero India 2025. Were they left without airtime, or did they choose not to fly?
Well, they left without airtime because they chose not to fly. So that's a way to put it more simply. So yeah. The point is, the F-35 and the Su-57 were supposed to participate in the in acrobatics and stuff like that. And as soon as the Su-57 appeared, the U.S. contractors decided to, participators, whatever you want to call them, decided not to go forward with the F-35 program for some reason. I don't know why. I mean, I know it's a really good jet. I have no idea why they would not show off its amazing kinetic skills. Anyway, and the interesting thing is the Indians are warming up to the Su-57 once again, because they realize that buying the F-35 is not an option because of the amount of control the U.S. has over every F-35 out there. So every F-35 you get is pretty much controlled by the Pentagon. And the level of control depends on how the U.S. rates you as an ally. So if you are like a tier 1 ally like Israel and the UK, you can control most of the aircraft. If you're like a tier 4 ally like, I don't know, Bulgaria or Romania, you're going to get a very little control over the aircraft that you bought, that you paid hundreds of millions of dollars for. So yeah, good luck with that.
George, do you have any idea why India might be cozying up to Russia? Do you think it has anything to do with oil?
You're muted.
George, you're muted. I don't know if you muted yourself, but I didn't mute you.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I just anyway. The yeah, it's noise going on in the background. Anyway, yeah. Look, a lot of people in the West just don't realize it, but India knows that the I keep on talking about Zbigniew Brzezinski and Stansfield Turner Operation Cyclone. They know the United States was behind arming the Sunni VEOs and the Mujahideen back in the late 70s, early 80s. They know that the people from the Arab Peninsula were throwing in way more money to turn those areas into from Safi and and um, and and Sufi groups to Wahhabi groups. They know who's behind it, but it's not. It's bad enough the United States did that during the 70s and 80s, but then we came back in the 2000s during the global war on terror and gave them $80 billion worth of training and equipment again. So the Indians are furious that they left this mess in the backyard. And yes, the Indians, Research Assistance Wing, RAW, knows that the United States left Afghanistan in a mess to go back into a regime change destabilization program of the Russian and Chinese infrastructure in that region. So
Research
India
Assistance Wing, huh?
Yeah, is not happy at all with the United States foreign policy over the last couple of decades because they know that they did that in Afghanistan on purpose. I mean, a lot of it was by accident, but some of it was on purpose. I'm not going to parse hairs of what exactly is what, but here. But no, they're not happy with that. They know that they need to get their oil and natural gas from Russia. They want to be part of the Eurasian Economic Union. They don't want to become part of the EU in the West, the collective West, because then the collective West just turns everything into Ukraine and Afghanistan. Why would they want to be part of that? So yeah, they want to trade with Russia and the people in the region constructively. So they want to stay out of that. They don't want to get on the hook of United States foreign military sales and become a security cooperation country. So it's a lot easier for them to get their oil and natural gas from Russia and their military weaponry from Russia. That's why they're doing that. They really hated the Biden administration for sending Dalip Singh, an Indian American, over to give them threats and lectures for Modi going to Moscow. They told him not to continue with the international north-south trade corridor through Chabahar port, and they tried to browbeat him away from doing that. I mean, and within days, Modi hopped on an aircraft and went straight to Moscow. So you talk about giving the double-barreled middle fingers to the Obama administration. Oh yeah, they did that big time. So yes, they followed that up with continuing the international north-south trade corridor, buying Russian oil and natural gas, the crude oil especially, refining it and then sending it out and defying U.S. sanctions. And then yes, of course, they went ahead to balance the trade out and bought the Russian aircraft because they want to become part of Eurasia, not the Five Eyes program, because they know they're not.
Yeah.
They kind of had that feelings with the British East India Company, one of those things.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. One of the most recent frustrations that India had with the U.S. was the Biden administration's pretty much color revolution in Bangladesh, which most people don't even know about. That as the toppled the Sheikh Hasina government, replaced it with the Yunus government, and this Yunus guy is pretty much a pro-Pakistani jihadist, if you want to, to put it in simpler terms. The whole point was to stop the participation of Russia in Bangladeshi nuclear power plant programs, because Russia offered like a 3 times cheaper alternative to this extremely expensive U.S. Offer, and of course U.S. didn't appreciate that very much, and then they toppled the Sheikh Hasina government. And the point is, the Sheikh Hasina government was this pretty progressive government, replaced by nationalist jihadists, and these jihadists are also very anti-Indian, and there are even talks about expelling Hindu people from Bangladesh. And for those who don't know, I just want to remind people, Bangladesh wouldn't exist as a country without India and partially the Soviet Union, because it was part of Pakistan until 1971. And it was called so-called East Pakistan, and the Pakistanis actually committed a freaking genocide, killing up to 3 million people there at the time. And the Indian Army was one of the determining factors that prevented the continuation of that genocide. And now we have the people, so that's why India is actually very, very frustrated with U.S. policies in the region, because the U.S. often supports the worst of the worst people. That's the issue they have with them.
Yeah, if you go
I have
on,
no idea.
If you go on to different YouTube channels that covered that, you'll see the pro-Islamist Bangladeshis talking about they've kicked out, the Indian influence, and they're saying that India is just a bunch of crybabies, a bunch of comments about that. That's very telling. And also the other thing is, you have what you said was going on in Bangladesh, but it also supports the insurgency in Myanmar, who's running the Chinese pipelines and railroad system for their Belt and Road system. So that's
Exactly
what they're trying to break up. So they're trying to break it up on both sides, supporting those insurgencies from Thailand and from Bangladesh. And also, yes, India is supporting some of those anti-Chinese groups, from its side in Manipur and Nagaland up north in the Chin State area of Myanmar. I'm talking about.
Yeah. I mean, the Indians and the Chinese are not always on good terms.
Yeah, they try to block each other's infrastructural projects because, just for people that don't know, the Silk Road project is about extending logistical supply routes for Caspian Sea oil and natural gas and minerals in the stands. The Belt and Road is extending those same logistical supply routes to the Indian Ocean and to the Persian Gulf. That's how it started out. There's also have ones that go through Southeast Asia to do different type of mission sets in Southeast Asia. But that's another story for another day. But yes, they're trying to stop the Chinese infrastructural projects from going through Pakistan on one side of India and Myanmar on the other side. That's what they're trying to stop.
Sounds like just spreading of democracy and freedom. I don't know what you're talking about, both of you. You seem to be like drunk on propaganda. Drunk on propaganda. It's democracy and freedom that is just spreading around the world. Here we go again. Forbes forced to retract fake story about failed Oreshnik launch. Drago, what is this talking about? This is relatively recent. This is from 2 days ago.
This is February 10. It's an interesting story because Forbes, I think it was last week, Friday, if I'm not mistaken, they ran a story about a so-called second failed launch of the Oreshnik by the Russians, which supposedly happened in, I suppose late January or something. They're not even sure about the date, and they're not. One of the reasons they're not sure about the date is because it never happened. It turned out that the source that they used, who was the Ukrainian mill blogger Kirill Sazonov, he just pulled the information out of his ass. Pardon my French. And said that it failed, and he provided zero evidence, but Forbes being Forbes, they went with the story, and then they had to retract it and apologize to the readers because they are spreading fake news, as if we didn't know that already. So anyway, some of the mainstream propaganda machine picked up the story, and then they expanded the story to say there were actually 2 failed launches. However, by the time
Time out. I have to rebrand them. They're not the mainstream propaganda machine anymore. They're the USaid propaganda machine. Because like you're saying, Ukrainian propaganda was quoted by Forbes, and was it Forbes as well that was being sponsored by, or was it The Economist? Was it Forbes or The Economist?
Both, because it's around like 1,000 news agencies around the world. I mean, news agencies, right?
Yeah.
Independent.
Yeah, independent news agencies. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, because they say something, and then other people, other agencies, news agencies, independent news agencies, quote them. And sometimes they overdo it, and that's how we got the story.
We thought that like they lived in an echo chamber, but the news sources are an echo chamber that feed the echo chamber, basically.
Exactly. It's an echo chamber of echo chambers, propaganda.
Oh yeah. Oh, and it works. It works very well. Look at the Pete Hegseth, General Jack Keane, General Kellogg, Sebastian Gorka network that he's hired. He's hired people out of this echo chamber that don't realize they're in an echo chamber. People need to realize it's so effective. Well, never mind. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is they were talking about this, and then these independent agencies picked up the story. They literally invented, because I read the original Forbes report. There was no mention of a second missile, but now they somehow invented the story, a new story about the second missile. So like not 1, but 2 missiles failed. That's how incapable the Russians are. Then Forbes retracts the story, and then it turns out the first missile that they talked about failed, and then they were left with the second Phantom missile. They can continue talking about that, because I haven't seen any retractions of that.
What can I say? It's hypersonic shovels. They're bound to go. They're bound to fail.
The most interesting thing is the reactions of Germany to me, because the Germans were essentially mocking the Oreshnik all this time for months, and now they're talking about being defenseless against it. So I mean, how are you defenseless against something that can't do anything to you, right? That's an interesting concept, I would say.
Maybe they got hint of the fact that the numbers that the Ukrainians are providing need to be audited as well. Let's do our final article. We're over the hour. We're an hour and 8 minutes into this. Political West brutally exploited Ukraine and now sees it as dead weight. No. Tell me it ain't so, Drago.
Yeah.
George, are you surprised? Are you shocked?
I am. I really don't know what to think. This is today's article, or I mean, should I say yesterday's now? The interesting thing here is we're getting a lot of these very, very peculiar statements from the U.S., from Poland, from the U.K., and these other countries. The Polish president Andrzej Duda said that he's now afraid that these millions of Ukrainian troops, who haven't been killed, obviously, are now a security threat to Europe because they have all these skills, and their economy is destroyed. Well, I mean, they told them that their economy is going to be great by going to the EU and NATO. I don't know how that happened. And now they will have no choice but to go to Europe and get some jobs because the economy in Ukraine is destroyed. However, they can't really work because they have skills in using weapons, and of course, the only way to use weapons in a civil society, in a civilian society, is to become part of a gang or some organized group. That's what pretty much he said. I mean, he didn't say it in those words, but that was the implication. And then you had Trump who's saying that, Ukraine, if it wants to get more of the so-called USaid, military aid in this case, it needs to give $500 billion worth of natural resources, rare earth minerals, he said specifically. So, that's interesting. Now, and Zelensky is promising those minerals, but the problem is most of those are now under Russian control. So he's promising. That's pretty much shuttle diplomacy. You are promising something that's not yours to promise, and that you can't really, promise or pledge in any way. So that's, I guess that's like, Zelensky's trying to pull off Kissinger, but he ended up being Kissinger from Temu or Alibaba or something. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, Trump just throws stuff out there because Trump's got so many balls in the air. He can't keep anything straight. That whole Gaza Riviera thing was totally PFA also. So yes, he's thrown out there without realizing, no, the gas, again, the gas fields and the rare earth metals and all that stuff just happen to be on the Russian side everywhere. I mean, not only in Ukraine, but in the Far East, everything seems to be on the Russian side, but not the Japanese side. I mean, the Russians are enormously lucky in that aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah. They picked the better spawn points when they were taking the loading map of this geostrategical Risk that we're playing.
Yeah.
Have you played Risk? George, did you ever play Risk? Risico, whatever it's called, where you're from?
Oh, Risk, I played it, I don't know, a couple of times. I mean, I'm not really into board games.
Yeah? All right. We'll find something
I
else.
lived in an area where I could walk outside my backyard and shoot. So, I mean, who cares about board games?
That does kind of pull one's persuasion to the outdoorsy kind of activities.
I get bored really easily. So no, that doesn't work for me at all.
All right. Well, you definitely wouldn't be welcome in the EU. You'd be in that Ukrainian people category that they're so afraid about.
I could do well in Switzerland. They do that there too.
Switzerland's a whole different. They give out grenades to their citizens, like not only guns. They have grenades, like that they're issued after military service. Switzerland.
Oh, Switzerland. Yeah. I know about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard that they are actually, taking much bigger guns to their homes, including like some anti-tank launchers or something. It's a bit of a, I'm all pro gun, but I think that's a bit too much.
No, I think it's perfectly fine. I think everybody should have their own anti-tank javelin and/or Igla. Like, you can choose whether you want anti-tank or anti-helicopter.
That's gonna be very good for airline safety. So yeah.
Democratization. Well, if every airline was like IAL and had chaff on it, like the civilian airliners of Israel do, then they would be okay. Speaking of, we've got the last meme for today for everybody who made it all the way to the end. Let me play this music. There we go. We've got both of you and the TV Syria being carved up by the free and democratic sources and forces, and they're all there, and he's saying, respect my territorial integrity, I believe.
Yeah.
What can I say? George, anything to say to sign off?
No, I'm going to take the fifth now.
Thank the Lord. Usually when you sign off, it takes like 3 minutes, so pleading the fifth is good.
Yeah.
Drago,
well, I can
anything to
talk
say?
about any area of economic history you want.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Next time. There's other times for that. Drago,
All
what
right.
you got? You got anything to sign off with?
Well, I guess people are gonna watch this like 5 days from now because you have a bunch of these videos to post. So yeah, this was all like filmed on the same day. I do change my clothes just for those who might think otherwise.
Yes, I
I'm
do have
just gonna wear
several.
I just wore this shirt the whole week. That's all.
Right.
I actually have several of these shirts. People who know me in real life can vouch to that. Maybe one day I'll show you guys on camera too. In any case, thank you for sticking around. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. George, thank you. Drago, thank you. Everybody, we'll be back eventually. Peace. Have a good one. Ciao.